years, there's been arguably no bigger innovation to get people into boating than the outboard motor. In the early 1900s, when the likes of Evinrude, Johnson, and later Mercury began to crank out their affordable power options, it did wonders for getting people out on the water en masse. Outboard motor brands have come and gone, been bought and sold, and continue to evolve through technology and innovation. But where do all the engines go when they become obsolete? Well, today we're going to take a deep dive into the world of the outboard motor. You think we could be in the right place?
Hey!
Hey, Sandy.
Welcome, come on in.
Thanks for having us. Holy smokes. This is absolutely incredible, Sandy.
Thank you for coming today.
Thanks for having us.
My pleasure.
So this right here is where the story of the outboard motor starts.
Absolutely. The very first outboard motor brand was Waterman. 1906 was the first outboard motor, which was a Waterman. Spring of 1907, Carman Waterman got his patent for the outboard motor, which was called the boat propelling device. These are considered very collectible motors in our hobby. This predated Evinrude, predated Johnson, predated Mercury. This is where the outboard motor started. The thought was that if he could turn a canoe or a rowboat into a power boat, there was a niche there. He was 100% correct. But as fate would have it, he was a great engineer, he wasn't a good marketer. And then other companies came along very shortly thereafter, like Evinrude, that were very good marketing companies. Soon thereafter, Waterman went out of business.
And that's why we would hear a lot more about Evinrude or Johnson or Mercury than we would about Waterman.
Correct.
Would he have adapted an inboard motor and turned it into what we see here?
This is a very old inboard motor. It's a Waterman. This motor is approximately 1905 to 1910. Common belief is that the Waterman started with the inboard motor and then from that engineered an outboard motor. 4-cylinder, 2-stroke, so no valves again. To start this motor, what you would do is you would put gasoline into the primer cups. Open up the spigot, suck the gas into the cylinder heads, then close the primer cups, and now you're ready to start the motor and spin the flywheel fast enough to make the motor engage.
Somebody who did have better marketing, and a guy we hear about a lot, was Ole Evinrude, and you've got a few of his engines over here.
This is Ole Evinrude. He is generally accepted and considered the founder and the creator of the outboard motor. Ole Evinrude patented in 1910 the marine propulsion mechanism.
So we had the boat propelling device, and now we've got the marine propulsion mechanism.
Correct.
What made Evinrude stick?
Evinrude was very, very good at marketing. They used women in their advertising, which was revolutionary at the time. By 1916, Waterman ceased to make outboard motors, and Evinrude, they were making so many they couldn't keep up with the orders. Sportsmen, hunters, fishermen, cottagers, everybody wanted an outboard motor for motorizing around their lake, their cottage, their river.
Where did Alto come into play?
Evinrude sold Evinrude motors to OMC, Outboard Motor Company. He served, I believe it was a 3-year non-compete. He then came back and formed the company Elto, E-L-T-O, Evinrude Light Twin Outboard. And Elto took off and was incredibly successful as well. He sold that one to OMC as well. So the Johnson outboard motor came into being in the 1920s and was very predominant in the 20s and 30s. It signified the mass production of motors. A good motor at a good price point, but really didn't change the industry that much. What did change the industry is Carl Kiekhaefer. Kiekhaefer bought Thor Motors, Cedarburg Manufacturing Company, in 1939 and renamed it Kiekhaefer Mercury. There's nothing really special about this at all. It was very crude, very basic, but this is where it started. Mercury, in the early 1940s, came out with this motor, which was one of his first successful motors, called the Comet. 2 cylinders, a very good motor at that time, but what the key to their success was, they underrated their horsepower. So 2 kids on a lake would have 2 different boats, 2 different motors. You would have a 10 horsepower Evinrude, I've had 10 horsepower Mercury. We'd race, the 10 horsepower Mercury would win every time because my 10 horsepower Mercury was 15 horsepower. Your 10 horsepower Evinrude was probably 8 horsepower. So the image was Mercury's are faster motors, they're better motors, they're higher performance motors. I want me one of them there, Mercury outboards. Kiekhaefer in the 50s came out with another innovation, and that was colors. So the anti-Henry Ford, you can have any color you want as long as it's black. Carl Kiekhaefer said you can have any color you want in the spectrum to match your fiberglass boat.
How did we get from these to that 100-horse race engine over there?
The 1950s were considered the golden era of hydroplane racing. Just like cars, more horsepower is better. Well, here's 40 horse, here's 60 horse. So Kiekhaefer sensed that and immediately went to the first production 100 horsepower motor. And that turned the industry again on its ear. The motors going up to as much as 100 horsepower could be used on bigger boats. And that appealed to more people as opposed to only inboard motors previous to that. Mercury came out in '62 with the first 100 horsepower production engine, straight six, which they had previous to that, but it wasn't 100 horsepower. First year for black outboard motors, and in the world of outboard motors, this made a change that a lot of those other companies never caught up with.
And I guess the rest, as they say, is history.
The rest is history.
Well, Sandy, we can't thank you enough for having us out to walk through the history of the outboard motor. We've got such a cool setup here, and we're so excited we got to come in and see it.
What intrigues me the most about this is sharing the story with other people.
Well, we're happy to have you do it with us.
Thank you for being here today.
This is the 2020 Seadoo RXTX 300. It's not your average Seadoo. Packing a 300 horsepower Rotax 1630 ACE engine and tons of the latest and greatest PWC technology, it's one of the fastest and most powerful Seadoos ever made. But despite the removable third seat, 26.1 gallons of intuitive storage, and the largest swim platform in the industry, it is still a personal watercraft, which means my friends and all their gear will have to take turns waiting on the dock on this beautiful summer day. Or will they? This is the Sealver Wave boat. It's a specially engineered fiberglass hull designed to fit around a PWC and turn it into a full-size powerboat. Today we're putting this 656 full-wake edition to the test.
Sealver Wave boat actually started in Europe, in France specifically, and these vehicles are actually produced by Sealver Canada. They're the distributor and the fabricator of these boats. So we get our boats straight out of Quebec. In fact, it was the Doral factory that is now producing these boats. In this particular application, this is a 21-foot boat that can carry up to 7 people. It allows you to both live the Sea-Doo life, but also enjoy actually having some people on board with you. It allows you, on the fly, to detach the Sea-Doo from the boat, leaving the boat anchored someplace. And depending on what watercraft you have, whether it's a Sea-Doo, Kawasaki, Yamaha, we actually have specific tracks that will apply to the boat, to the vessel. And these tracks allow for the watercraft to slide in nicely, be nice and snug. And at the back, we attach the watercraft to the boat, so it's nice and tight. And you just go out there and enjoy your day. It's just as easy to detach while you're in the water. The 656 full wake is at the top of Sealver's line at 21 feet 6 inches long with an 8-foot beam, weighing in at 1,322 pounds without the PWC. Standard on the 656 full wake, as the name suggests, is a wakeboard tower with board racks, a bimini top, and a fusion stereo system that's controlled and powered on its own thanks to a rechargeable battery on board. Fully forward, you'll find an anchor locker big enough for a small winch. The bow lounging area is roomy with snap-down cushions and self-draining storage compartments under each seat. A standard table pops in and out, and filler cushions turn the whole area into a good-sized lounger. At midship on each side are 2 more storage compartments, one of which can be replaced with a factory-optional fridge, and the other which houses the battery that also powers the running lights, anchor lights, and accessory ports. There's also plenty of deck space around the PWC, plus an aft seat to starboard, and a nice big sunbed to port, perfect for lounging or spotting the action behind the boat, and both have built-in storage as well. As far as ease of use goes, the whole point of the Sealver is that it turns your PWC into a bigger boat. So one of the most important things to find out is how difficult that is to do. How easily can you dock or undock the Sea-Doo when you're beached or anchored? Still, some wiggling and a bit of throttle in reverse got me out fine. Although don't get me wrong, it's a good thing it fits in snug. When you're out on the PWC, the Sealver makes a great place for the rest of the crew to swim, dangle your feet in the water, or just hang out with the stereo still running thanks to that battery on board.
Getting back in the Sealver was slightly challenging in some waves. If you don't line up right with the nylon rails, you won't be able to lock in. But once you do get lined up properly, a bit of throttle and the nose wiggles right back into place. The whole system is super easy to drive. It's exactly like driving a PWC. So if you haven't done that, there'd be a bit of a learning curve, but it really is quite easy to get used to. And honestly, I was expecting this whole hull to turn this PWC into a tank, but I'm pretty impressed with the way that it handles. What I'm really impressed with, though, is how solid this thing feels. It's pretty easy to forget that I'm driving a Seadoo with a big fiberglass hull strapped around it. This is a two-piece boat, but this compatibility kit is holding the Seadoo perfectly in place, no vibration whatsoever. If you haven't noticed, it is pretty loud, and when I hit waves, it can be pretty wet, but then again, what PWC is it? Around the dock, it's almost as easy to control as the Seadoo on its own, with the IBR braking system still working to switch from forward to reverse while snugly inside the Sealver. Our test model being the full wake version, I wanted to put the wake part to the test. Pulling up a rider was nothing for the 300 horsepower RXTX. You're not going to get the same rampy wake you would on a V-drive wake boat, but there's plenty there to pull up anyone for a nice tow when you're out for the day. My final verdict? The Sealver is a super fun and cool new toy that could be a great option for current PWCers looking to mix in the social and family aspects of boating without giving up their Seadoo lifestyle. At under $40,000 for this 656 full wake, plus the cost of the PWC, it's still less expensive than almost all new jet boats. And with a trailer that can hold both the boat and the PWC, it's a good way to take the best of both worlds with you wherever you want to go. In 1957, Mercury founder Carl Kiekhaefer purchased this, Lake X, as a place where he could keep all his racing developments a secret. Well, we just found out that Mercury has a big secret, and they've invited us here to the same place they've tested every single outboard since 1984 to spill the beans on what they're calling the biggest and most innovative outboard they've ever made. But what Mercury had been keeping under wraps was even bigger than we had imagined.
I'd like to introduce the Mercury 7.6 liter V12 600 horsepower outboard Verado.
The first thing you notice about this motor is its size. 7.6 liters of displacement, weighing in at 1,260 pounds, dwarfing anyone who stands beside it. To fit in 12 cylinders, it would have to be massive. But as big as it looks in the showroom, it fits perfectly on the transom of today's massive center consoles. Make no mistake, this isn't just bigger is better. Look closer and you'll see that Mercury has packed in a bunch of industry firsts that make the 600 Verado its most innovative outboard ever.
From a steerable gear case, the first in the outboard industry, to a 2-speed transmission, to new digital throttle and shift, extended maintenance, unbelievable performance. We're just having the time of our life out here.
We went back to the drawing board with this one and really listened to the customers, OEMs, dealerships to really understand what they are looking for in this engine. Higher speed cruise, great fuel economy, and that's really what this was built around. With the propellers, we went to counter-rotating propellers to really get the blade area for these big, heavy boats to get a lot of vertical lift and also to accelerate the boats. If we step back and really look at how we then develop this, we start with a 2-speed gear case. So the 2-speed transmission really gets this ability to pop these boats out of the hole, get the bow down so that they're cruising and much more comfortable about accelerating the boat. When we get to second gear, we can power shift all the way so that the engine continues to make power, the boat keeps accelerating right to redline. So once you take that shifting and move it outside the gearbox into effectively a transmission, it's not much harder to add another gear. With the 2-speed, we have wet clutches, so when you go out in the boats, you won't feel these things shift. Unless you're watching the tack, you won't know they shift. And it's the same thing in joystick or right at the docks. When the clutches are engaging, they're engaging softly. When we make these big engines, 7.6 liter, it takes up a lot of room on the transom. With those boats, we still want to get a lot of horsepower in the back to really move these boats near 80 mile an hour. So with that, we went to a steerable gear case. That steerable gear case allowed us to put the engine still in 27-inch centers, but be able to really deliver the control, precision control that the boat operators wanted.
If you haven't experienced it yet, Get on a boat, experience it. I think you're in for an eye-opening experience.
Well, that sounds like a great idea. For its launch, Mercury lined up 6 of its biggest and baddest manufacturing partners to show off just what this motor can do. I hopped on board a 2021 Boston Whaler 420 Outrage, packing triple 600s to get my first feel for the new power. We putted out past the iconic observation tower with just the hum of the engines in our ear. The engines are still on. You cannot hear a thing. This is 600 horsepower. It feels like they're off. It is incredible.
It's even quieter than our current V8 Verado. We've made a massive investment, over $12 million into our new NVH center. We have 2 semi-anechoic chambers where we can do sound testing. And an engine like this, it really takes that level to be able to hear every single error state to understand what's the issue and fix it. And that's ultimately, when you get out on the boats, you hear it. It is just pure refinement. You know, everything to how the door shuts, just like in a car. We want the service lid to shut. It just really screams quality, and it's well thought through.
Of course, I had to get a feel for all this power, so first chance I got, I jumped behind the wheel of the 420 Outrage. What do you think I'm going to feel here with this dual-speed transmission when we're accelerating?
Well, one of the first things that is just how instantaneous the lift and forward movement of the boat is. The other item is that, you know, you're getting right to speed pretty quickly. So, you know, you're getting right into your cruise, into the comfort level for the entire cruise. Yeah. So those are things that you're going to experience right away. You may or may not feel the transmission. It's a load sensing transmission, so it'll shift when it determines that it's right for the engine, so there's no predetermined shifting point. Right. So these things, all of these things in combination, basically are just going to give you an effortless experience throttling up the boat.
I'm all about effortless, so let's give it a shot. With 3 pairs of counter-rotating props, the Whaler hops up on top of the water right out of the hole shot. The 2-speed transmission is a game changer with this type of power.
Oh yeah, you can feel that kick in there. Oh yeah.
With a 20% reduction in gear ratio, first gear pushes the boat out of the hole. When it settles onto plane, the motors shift into second automatically, dropping RPMs for better fuel economy at speed. You wouldn't know it unless you were looking down at the tachometer, though. The shift is so smooth you literally feel nothing. It all works to accelerate this 32,000-pound load from 0 to 30 in just over 8 seconds, and up to a top speed of 63 miles per hour. Coming up, we'll see just how much speed we can get out of these 600 Verados, and what it means for the future of boats. 600 horsepower in the industry's first V12 outboard. Our first question, why do we need this much power in an outboard?
Boats are getting bigger. Some of these boats up to 50,000 pounds and above. So instead of getting 5 or 6 outboards on the back, now you can do it easily with 3 or 4.
It is an impressive outboard. Just standing next to it, you can see its size. You know, it's imposing. But when you get on the back of a 50-foot, 60-foot boat, it's the right size, and it really fits in really beautifully with these boats.
Typically, when people think outboards, they've got this old preconceived notion of what an outboard is. And the reality of it is the outboards, they're super quiet, they're fuel efficiency, they're just an amazing setup on the power plant. These new 600s with the V12, you know, they've got an access port for maintenance, so you don't have to take the cowling off for the first 1,000 hours.
Under joystick control, we can pivot these 45 degrees, so it gives a lot more authority versus a standard 30 degrees. The whole outboard's not moving quickly with under joysticking, it's just the gear case. So you don't feel the boat jumping back and forth as these engines are rocking. They're just rock solid.
This is our brand new Tierra Yachts 48 LS. So this is the largest in our LS lineup, purposefully designed and built around the new Mercury 600 engines. Considerations for accessibility to the water. The fact that the engines don't move gave us the ability to make the swim platforms extra wide, so ease of water off both sides of the boat. It gives you a tremendous amount of authority around the dock with the joystick, and then we get all the performance. This boat goes 60 miles an hour. This brand new Mercury propulsion package is the only propulsion package for this product.
Well, this is an amazing new boat that we crafted. It's a 500 SSC, so it's in the family of our super sport crossovers. This one came together after about 2.5 years of planning and almost 2.5 years of knowledge of these amazing engines that you see right here. We really needed those engines to make this package come together. So when we had the opportunity, when we knew this was coming, we were really excited. And it's a little bit freaky at first because you're in a turn, and the motors aren't turning, but you're turning, but it's all like a little pod drive thing going on down at the bottom.
The acceleration curve is incredible, and we just dropped down to second gear, and you don't even feel it. Right up to 60? This is 74 miles an hour. It didn't feel like we were going over 25. That is crazy. You forget how fast you're going in this Valhalla V46 until you step out from behind the console and the wind almost knocks you back, but I don't think COVID's gonna catch us out here.
Lake X, the history here is just unbelievable. Back in 1957, Carl Kiekhaefer bought it for secrecy. He didn't want other people to see what was going on. Just the history of Mercury tied to Lake X, all the things that came around here. I think Carl would be smiling right now if he saw a 600 horsepower V12 running up and down this lake. We just need it a little bit longer, though.
When Mr. Kiekhaefer had Lake X, we were dealing with 30 horsepower engines. And, it'd be awesome to understand what Mr. Kiekhaefer would think about 600 horsepower. I knew we were going to move forward. The jump to 600 horsepower is really, a great thing. It surprised us, but we could clearly see where the boats were going.
It's been interesting to follow the evolution of the outboard motor from its humble beginnings right through to the groundbreaking new Mercury 600 V12. Looking at where we are, we can't wait to see what the future has in store for boating. Thanks for coming along for the ride.
We're gonna spray the room, that's what we call it now.
Spray the room?
Spray the room.